When a millionaire's joke turned into an amazing transformation, everyone was left speechless. Dan stood at the back of the grand ballroom, the hum of laughter and clinking glasses wrapping around him like a paralyzing shroud. He watched as shimmering gowns swirled and expensive suits paraded, each person radiating the kind of confidence only wealth could instill. Here he was, a humble science teacher from a small town, feeling like a misplaced puzzle piece surrounded by a picture-perfect world. A soft snicker nearby pulled him from his thoughts. A billionaire, tall and imposing, casually flaunted his effortless charm by poking fun at Dan's worn-out sneakers, how out of place they were amidst polished leather shoes. Those words, casually wrapped in humor, echoed through the crowd, drawing laughter that cut deeper than any academic critique ever had. In those fleeting moments, Dan's heart raced, not from shame, but from a simmering embers of resolve. He could feel the weight of years spent struggling to keep his head above water, the bills piling in mailboxes while he inspired young minds to explore the stars. But here, beneath the glitz, he questioned his worth. Did he belong to this world, or was he forever destined to remain in the shadows, smiling while feeling like a ghost? The laughter stung, igniting memories of self-doubt. Maybe he was meant to serve as a backdrop for the true stars of this society, an observer in a world that only valued luxury and glossy appearances. But he could feel something stirring within him, an impulse to shake off the expectation to silently fade away. What if he transformed that laughter into a weapon instead? What if he used the pain as fuel to ignite a change? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Weeks implemented into this newfound fire, he poured himself into hands-on projects for his students. The sting of the millionaire's joke now served as an unexpected catalyst. Dan turned his underfunded classroom into a sanctuary of creativity, experimenting with ideas that brought science to life. The smell of vinegar and baking soda filling the air as eruptions of enthusiasm filled his students' hearts. His classroom transformed into a place of discovery. But every moment he felt exhilaration, he also felt the shadows of doubt creeping back. Was he being naive? In a town where resources dwindled, could they reach beyond their means to make this happen? Amid the thrill, whispers lurked behind closed doors. Class prejudice intertwined. With every accolade gained or support received, a whisper would taunt him, a reminder of the class barriers he was forced against. The weight of it all pressed against his chest, clammy hands gripping the podium moments before he would shift gears into the prestigious grant competition. As the deadline approached, the stakes elevated, and Dan stood at the edge of a chasm, caught between the laughter of the affluent and the hopeful eyes of his students. Could he rise above the shadows, or would his aspirations crumble like the fragile confidence he had built? The cracks began to crawl, twisting their way to the surface just when he thought he could finally shine. With a breath that felt like a heavy stone lodged in his throat, he prepared for the monumental battle that loomed ahead, knowing that one final presentation could determine his fate. Would that billionaire's careless jest haunt him forever, or would it unveil the transformational journey hidden beneath the walls of doubt? The day of the grant presentation arrived, the air thick with anticipation and concern. Dan stood backstage, the low rumble of conversations wafting through the curtain, mixing with his heartbeat, each beat a reminder of the stakes. He had rehearsed the pitch so many times it felt like second nature, yet there remained a flicker of doubt. Would they see the value in his ideas? Would they recognize the potential locked within each science experiment designed for students who, like him, were not born into privilege? His reflection staring back at him was not just that of a teacher, but of a man redefined, eager not only to make a mark on the world, but to carve a path that might inspire others. Gripping the edge of the podium, he focused on his mission, to showcase not just the project, but the possibility of transcendence. He visualized the faces of his students, the sparks of curiosity ignited by each experiment, and his resolve solidified. Stepping into the spotlight, he faced the panel of judges, business magnates who wielded their wealth and influence like weapons. Their expressions were unreadable, cloaked behind a veneer of professionalism. Dan inhaled, grounding himself in the moment. This was not merely a competition, it was a declaration of his worth and the worth of every child he taught. As he launched into his presentation, enthusiasm enveloped him, drowning the voices of doubt. With every well-pitched explanation, he illustrated how the project could harness creativity and empower students scientifically. He wove in their stories, provided context, and spotlighted dreams. His dreams. And he could feel the energy in the room shift. A spark of connection ignited when they responded, leaning forward as if drawn into his vision. But with every moment of triumph, the whispers of prejudice nagged at him, reminding Dan of his humble beginnings. As he concluded, a sudden wave of panic flooded his mind. The laughter of that billionaire haunted him, the laughter that mocked rather than uplifted. Would they view him as another plebeian trying to swim among sharks? He wrestled with those thoughts even as he maintained composure, the fear that surged within him threatening to send him spiraling if he didn't regain control. "You've done an admirable job highlighting the creativity in education," one judge remarked, his voice steady but sharp, slicing through Dan's brave front. "However, what makes you think our resources should go to a project like yours when we could invest it elsewhere?" The question felt like a jab, punctuating the air that had just begun to fill with hope. Goosebumps raced down Dan's arms. Was this the moment that would shatter his vision, or could he transform this skepticism into his advantage? Summoning courage, he leaned into the feelings that once held him hostage, his own story entwined with those of his students. "Because education should not be a privilege," he replied, a newfound fire igniting in his voice. "It's a right. It's about fostering a future for all young minds, regardless of background. We can either choose to uplift those who feel unseen or let the status quo silence their potential." He delivered those words with an earnestness that surprised even him. The room fell silent, absorbing his resolve, and a flicker of admiration replaced skepticism on a few faces. Yet uncertainty knotted in Dan's stomach. The outcome still hung precariously in the balance. As he left the stage, the weight of what he had just dared to challenge hovered over him. Did he defeat the whispers of doubt, or were they merely paused, biding their time until their voices could re-emerge? He could only hope he would receive the validation he sought. No matter the outcome, he had taken a step far beyond what he felt capable of just weeks prior. As the judges gathered to deliberate, anxiety coiled tighter. Would he redefine his future, or return to shadows from which he'd begun? The moment of truth was upon him. A single click of a pen on paper could write the next chapter of his life. Dan paced the narrow corridor, the tension inside him buzzing like a live wire. Each tick of the clock echoed ominously, reminding him that the judges were in the process of determining his fate. As seconds turned into what felt like hours, his hands fidgeted in his pockets, searching for the solace of change. Somewhere deep within him, he wrestled with not just the outcome of the presentation, but the resonance of his own transformation. He replayed the moments on stage in vivid detail. The way he felt the energy shift in the room was palpable, yet he couldn't shake the nagging fear that perhaps it had all been an illusion. an ephemeral connection that would dissolve as quickly as it had formed. Doubt gnawed at him, reminding him of the skepticism faced by others from backgrounds like his. As he sank into contemplation, a shadow loomed. What would his students think if he failed? This was about more than his desires. It was a chance to redefine boundaries, to offer opportunities that were denied to so many. In those moments of reflection, a whisper of realization crept in. He had stepped beyond his comfort zone, sparking the kind of courage that once felt unimaginable. The laughter of that well-heeled businessman had catalyzed a powerful shift within him, thrusting him into a kind of confrontation he didn't know he needed to face. Each word he had spoken on stage rang in his ears, unveiling layers of himself he had long kept buried. Just then, the rustle of the curtain pulled him back to the present. 2 judges appeared, their expressions inscrutable. An unsettling mixture of dread and hope surged through him. He had spent his life hoping for someone to notice him, and now found himself in the position of having to stand firm against potential rejection. "Dan, we appreciate your time and enthusiasm," one of the judges began, and Dan's heart raced, the weight of those words hanging heavily in the air. "However, we have concerns regarding the practical application of your project and its sustainability." His stomach twisted. The projected visions of becoming a changemaker felt like thin glass. One word could shatter them. It was time to fight back, to challenge their perception yet again. "What if I could show you that my project is not just an idea, but an opportunity to make a genuine impact?" he proposed, surprising himself with the assertiveness that flowed from his lips. "We live in a world where so many are left behind. By investing in their education, we are investing in a sustainable future, one driven by innovation rather than class distinction." The judges listened, skepticism wavering, and he recognized that he was not merely defending his project, but advocating for every student whose potential was underestimated. With a surge of conviction, he continued, drawing parallels to successful models around the country. With each reference, he illustrated how students had already begun changing their communities through practical applications of science and technology. As Dan concluded his impromptu defense, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had confronted not just the judges, but his own unacknowledged fears. He realized that standing up and fighting for what was right had become a necessary part of his evolution. Whatever the outcome of this presentation, his understanding of his purpose deepened. As the judges contemplated his argument, the tension in the room mounted again. He had articulated a vision that could redefine not just his future, but the futures of countless young minds. Could this shift in momentum be enough to turn the tide? Just as the silence reached a breaking point, he caught one judge's eye. Their expression bore the weight of the decisions being made, a microcosm of doubt and revelation. Something told him they were about to reveal more than just the outcome of his grant. Perhaps they were about to impart a lesson that would shape his next steps. And in that instant, Dan understood the journey was far from over. The real transformation lay ahead, waiting just beyond the threshold of uncertainty. The silence stretched on, suffocating in its weight. In that charged moment, Dan's breath steadied as he grappled with the looming potential for rejection. Less than 5 feet away, the judges conferred in hushed tones, their gestures punctuating their deliberation. With each flicker of their eyes toward him, a cascade of thoughts intruded upon his mind. What next move could he play? How could he further assert his case? A sudden rush of boldness surged through him. Just minutes ago, he had wrestled with doubt, but now he felt an ember of resolve igniting within him. It was not merely about winning a grant. It was about shaping a vision that could alter trajectories, his own and countless others. He shifted his posture, straightening his spine and standing tall. It was time to raise the stakes. What if my approach becomes a model for other schools? Dan interjected, his voice resolute. "By showcasing student innovations, we offer them a platform to prove that their backgrounds do not dictate their futures. This isn't just my project, it's a chance to revolutionize how we see education." The judges stopped their murmuring. It was as if his words had reverberated through the room, arresting their attention. He pressed on, fueled by the shift in energy, each point like a carefully aimed arrow aimed right at the heart of the matter. Imagine a student from a low-income neighborhood, armed with the resources to explore their brilliance. They aren't just data points in a program, they are agents of change. Isn't that worth investing in? Each query lingered in the air like the scent of possibility, and for the first time he saw a flicker of engagement in their expressions, the hardened lines of skepticism softening momentarily. But underneath the adrenaline lay a current of fear. What if they still didn't see it? What if his conviction fizzled in the face of cold, hard reality? It was a precipice, and Dan realized he was teetering on the edge not only of his aspirations, but his self-worth. He remembered the students who relied on him. A wave of determination surged through him as he contemplated their potential. The lives altered through education, the doors he could open. He wasn't just arguing for funding, he was championing an opportunity for hope. And then, like a string plucked too tightly, the atmosphere shifted again. One judge, a woman with piercing eyes, broke the silence. "You've articulated your vision vividly, Dan, but articulate vision is only one part of the equation. How do you plan to quantify the success of your project? How will you ensure that these changes are sustainable?" Her question unfolded a new horizon for him. It was a challenge, yes, but there was a glimmer of respect woven into her tone. This was an opportunity, not just to defend, but to dig deeper into his approach. Dan inhaled sharply, deliberating on the foundation of his project. "I'm developing metrics to measure student engagement and growth. These aren't just numbers. They're testament to dreams being realized. With the right support, we can cultivate a feedback loop that ensures ongoing improvement." As he spoke, he began to comprehend the depths of his vision with newfound clarity. This was not merely a project, it was a testament to resilience, rooted in accountability. He felt the excitement swell within him, transforming doubt into unfiltered ambition. The judge's expressions now bore a heavy mix of contemplation and intrigue. Dan's passion appeared to spark something beyond their formalized skepticism. As the discussion progressed, he could sense the transformative power unfolding. He wasn't just fighting to be heard, he was catalyzing a vital conversation about the future of education itself. Yet, just as the hope gathered weight, Dan recognized a foreboding undercurrent. The judges were silent again, sharing glances that prompted his pulse to quicken. What were they really thinking? "I need to know," he whispered to himself internally, demanding clarity in the face of uncertainty. The moment of definitive breakthrough loomed closer, but could he sustain this momentum? As the minutes ticked away, anticipation coiled tight, and a single question hung in the air. Had he truly convinced them, or would he leave their presence carrying the burden of doubt once more? Suddenly, one of the judges raised a finger, as if preparing to make a pronouncement that would steer Dan's fate in either direction. It was now or never. Would he rise to the occasion? Would the true test of a leader reveal itself in the choices they were about to make? The air hung thick with anticipation, each second feeling like an eternity. Dan's heart raced as he braced himself for the judge's response. There it was, the moment he had prepared for, where every conversation he'd had and every sleepless night spent refining his vision had led him. A bead of sweat trickled down the back of his neck, but he steadied himself, reminding himself that this was not merely a presentation. It was a manifestation of everything he had fought for. The judge, the one who initially probed him, lowered her finger, folded her hands, and leaned forward. Dan, you certainly have the passion and conviction, but we need clarity. It's admirable to dream big, but how will you navigate the day-to-day obstacles? What if unexpected challenges arise? His mind raced. Obstacles, wasn't that part of the plan? He had anticipated hurdles, but how to explain that without sounding defensive? Gathering his thoughts, he expressed, "Every transformative effort faces obstacles. I've started partnering with local businesses for sponsorship, ensuring resources are diversified and accessible. Yet, I recognize the need for a dynamic strategy. We'll hold quarterly reflections with our students to adapt and evolve our approach in real time." As he spoke, the lines, energy filled the room, and he sensed his momentum building again. This wasn't just about academics. It was about developing life skills in real-world contexts, fostering resilience. The thought hit him. He could include local community leaders in advisory roles to oversee the sustainability of the project, embedding it within the very fabric of the environment it sought to uplift. Would something like that resonate with the broader school framework? He proposed, eyes scanning the judges for a sign of engagement. The judge nodded slightly, respect illuminating her expression. That shows foresight. But what about the personal accountability? How will you ensure the students internalize these values and make them their own? That struck a chord. This wasn't just an initiative. It culminated in self-empowerment. Dan began to understand his role, not as a mere facilitator of a program, but as a mentor guiding individuals on a path of self-discovery. We will embed personal narratives into our curriculum, encouraging students to identify their journeys and cultivate a sense of ownership in their growth. It's crucial they feel they are the architects of their futures. The judges whispered among themselves, and Dan saw a subtle shift. His words were resonating at a deeper level. Yet, beneath the excitement flickering to life was a growing awareness of the responsibility he was assuming. This was more than a career launchpad. It was about affecting genuine change in people's lives. Questions haunted him. What if he failed them? Would he break the very dreams he sought to empower? "Do you have a plan for measuring individual student accountability?" a different judge asked, breaking his reverie. The inquiry sliced through his growing confidence like a cold gust of wind. Plans were crucial, yet what could he offer them that wasn't just platitudes? "Regular check-ins will be fundamental," he started, grappling for a solution that both acknowledged the challenges while keeping focus on the mission. "Peer assessments will ensure that students not only take ownership but also learn from each other's insights. By fostering a culture of constructive feedback, we can create accountability in a supportive manner." It felt right, his vision transforming in real time, reshaping itself to the very critique that once threatened to choke his aspirations. The realization that evolving was part of the journey ensnared him, anchoring him in purpose. But as the discussion progressed, Dan noticed a tension in their demeanor, more scrutinizing than interested now. Their questions were relentless, each probing deeper into his plans. The stakes felt higher now, and self-doubt fluttered ominously in the back of his mind, a dark companion. And then it happened. One judge, a man with a stern brow, asked, "What will you do if you do everything right and the change you seek still doesn't manifest?" The question hung starkly in the air, as if Dan were standing directly before a precipice. Was this the crux of leadership? Embracing failure and the realization that plans could crumble? How would he respond? The moment demanded more than a simple answer. It called for candor. Would he spiral into the depths of regret or rise above, allowing this very challenge to fortify his resolve? As the judges awaited his answer, it became clear. This was the moment to confront his deepest fears head-on, unveiling his truth as a leader. Dan took a breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle firmly on his shoulders. It pooled in the pit of his stomach, an iron weight that tugged at his resolve. But he could not allow doubt to overtake him now. "If I do everything right, and the change I seek still doesn't manifest," he began, the intensity of his gaze fixed on the judges, "it would tell me that I need to reevaluate not just my methods, but my approach to leadership." The silence that followed hung in the air, an electric tension that charged the space around him. The judges seemed to lean in, eager for his next words. "I'd start by gathering feedback, not just from the students, but from everyone involved. Understanding their experiences would provide insights into what we might be missing. It would allow us to pivot, to adapt, and to, most importantly, recenter our focus on the students' narratives instead of rigid metrics." A flicker of approval moved through the room. Yet Dan's own self-doubt whispered insidiously at the back of his mind. Would they really buy into this? Could they recognize that leadership was an evolution, not a destination? The stern judge nodded slightly, and Dan seized the moment. "Each setback presents a lesson. I believe that embracing those moments is crucial for us as a team and for our students. By modeling resilience, by showing them how to fail and learn, we can make our initiative an incubator for grit and growth." The words resonated with a conviction he hadn't entirely owned only moments before. Yet even as he articulated his vision, invisible chains held him back. These were not easy promises he was making. They were commitments. The deeper he dove into the challenges, the more he felt the responsibility clamp down around him. The pressure to create something meaningful, something that could withstand scrutiny. "Let's say we do manage to implement these strategies," one female judge interjected, her tone probing. "How will you keep yourself motivated amidst inevitable setbacks?" His gut twisted at the directness of the question. Motivation was fleeting, driven by external forces, yet the thought of gratifying purpose surged within him, a flame rekindled. "I will anchor my motivation in the students," he replied. "Every experience shared, their struggles and triumphs, will drive me. Knowing that I am part of their journey fuels me to create better opportunities for them. Focusing on their development puts everything else into perspective." A murmur of approval rippled through the judges. He could see their expressions softening, their analytical scrutiny melting into a glimmer of intrigue. This mentoring role was beyond him. It was a mission now, a calling. But amid the budding confidence grew a visceral fear. What if, despite his best efforts, he faltered? What if he stood powerless to reassure a student who found themselves lost in despair? As if anticipating his thoughts, the stern judge asked, "Have you thought through how to handle resistance, the kind that could come from students unresponsive to your vision?" The question echoed within him, revealing a vulnerability he hadn't granted much thought. "That's a significant concern," he admitted, his tone steadying. "I envision a strength in open communication, building emotional connections first. By fostering relationships based on trust, students will feel invested. The key lies in understanding their individual motivations and building upon them. But if resistance arises, it will be my task to listen actively and iterate based on their perspectives." The air crackled with a sense of clarity, yet under it lay a persistent anxiety. Would these strategies hold up under pressure? Could he truly guide others when parts of him felt unsteady? The judges remained contemplative, their sudden quiet a canvas for Dan's unresolved thoughts. Like a bowstring drawn tight, he sensed a turning point. Every question they posed was an invitation to delve deeper into his own psyche. Peering into the breadth of what it would take to realize change amidst countless challenges, he stared into the eyes of his own potential. But then, a moment where the once clear aspirations became foggy emerged when one judge leaned forward with a piercing gaze. "If things don't unfold as you envision, what will that mean for you personally?" Dan felt the ground shift beneath him. It was confronting to consider failure not just as a possibility, but as a fixture in any narrative of growth. Yet at that moment, he discovered a kernel of truth. It would mean he needed to iterate, to learn, and perhaps most importantly, to embrace the humility of imperfection. Failure means growth. It transforms me, shapes my resilience as a leader, Dan replied, his voice notably steadier. Yet in the depths of his soul, doubt lingered, like shadows flickering at the periphery of his mind. The moment of resolve left him suspended between ambition and apprehension. The deliberation of the judges became an integral part of his growth. Each word they spoke a step closer to his evolution. "Very well then," the stern judge concluded, breaking the taut silence. "We'll review your proposal further, but understand this. What you're asking for is more than commitment. This is a journey of demanding reflection." As Dan left the room, the reality dawned upon him. He was in a turbulent sea of unknowns, and he understood. To embrace this challenge fully meant confronting himself at every turn. And as he stepped away from the judge's station, the question lingered. Would he truly be able to evolve as his proposal demanded? The next chapter of his life was about to unfold, but would he have the courage to meet the waves head-on? Dan walked down the stark corridor, the fluorescent lights buzzing above, casting a harsh glow on his thoughts. Each step reverberated with uncertainty, the reality of his words settling heavily on his chest. The room echoed the lingering doubts. Was he prepared to face the inertia of apathy among the students? Would they even care about his vision? His resolve felt like skeleton scaffolding, strong yet precarious. Outside, the sun bathed the world in vibrant light, but his mind was clouded, filling with shadows of doubt. As he headed toward his office, he wrestled with the risks ahead. What if passion wasn't enough? Leadership demanded action, but was he truly ready to transform intentions into tangible change? The typical clamor of the office faded into the background as he sat at his desk, staring blankly at scattered papers. Each syllabus and report symbolized a weight he now felt deeply, a weight that matched the responsibility he carried. He picked up a report detailing last semester's student engagement statistics. The numbers bore the evidence of what he feared, a stark disconnect between his ambitions and reality. "Think, Dan," he muttered to himself, staring at the data, searching for a beacon among the chaos. He recognized the need to articulate a purpose that could transcend the static barriers he faced. And yet, in that moment, he felt paralyzed, overwhelmed by the chasm that lay between vision and reality. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his reveries. It was Jenna, one of the teaching assistants, her bright demeanor contrasting sharply with his internal fog. "You okay?" she asked, concern weaving through her voice. "Just processing," he admitted, failing to conceal the strain in his tone. "I read your proposal. It's a great start, but you can't do everything alone, you know? You will need to engage your team," Jenna encouraged, leaning against the doorframe. Dan nodded slowly, a flicker of clarity cutting through his web of thoughts. She was right. Walking this path alone would only cultivate his insecurities. He needed to leverage the strengths of those around him. But how could he do that when he felt stretched so thin? "What if we form a core group, reliable people who can help execute methodically?" Jenna suggested, her sincerity evident. "And you can lead discussions to get the students involved." Her words snowballed into an idea: collaboration. Perhaps it wasn't solely his role to drive the change. He could facilitate an environment where others contributed. It was a leap of faith, but pairing his vision with the insights of his colleagues could illuminate new pathways. Taking a deep breath, he shifted in his chair, slowly reigniting his spirit. "That's brilliant, Jenna. I need to lean on my strengths as a facilitator, not just as a leader." The realization sent adrenaline coursing through him. If he cultivated a collective voice, the project would become a tapestry woven from many threads, students, mentors, and peers alike. "Let's map out a strategy," he proposed, excitement glinting in his eyes. "When can we meet to discuss it in detail?" Jenna smiled brightly, energized by his renewed vigor. "How about tomorrow? I'll gather a few others. We can brainstorm engagement strategies and iron out a timeline." As she left, Dan felt the weight on his chest lighten, replaced with a sense of purpose burgeoning within him. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he could finally see the contours of a solid path. In tapping into the collective wisdom around him, he felt emboldened to not only lead, but to empower. That night, as he sat at his desk revising notes, he realized he had encountered a significant shift. It wasn't merely about proposing change. It was about orchestrating a culture where those involved were active participants in their own transformation. The challenge now lay in facilitating those connections and igniting involvement. Yet as enthusiasm swelled within him, anxiety erupted in the corners of his mind. What if the group rejected his ideas? What if they couldn't adapt quickly enough? The doubts nagged at him, but he had taken the first step towards something greater. He could no longer retreat into isolation. The pressure built as he prepped for the meeting. The potential for resistance and misaligned expectations haunted him. Would he have the emotional resilience to navigate disagreements? As he finally laid down his head to sleep, exhaustion stole over him, but beneath the fatigue flickered determination. Tomorrow would be pivotal. The time had come to face the unknown, to confront the fears that threatened to anchor him. He had to embrace the vulnerability of leading a collaborative effort, while still nurturing the spark within himself. And with every beat of his heart, he felt a new question take root. Could he truly transform not just the initiative, but himself in the process? The uncertainty loomed large, but for the first time since the judge's deliberation, hope shone a little brighter. The sun climbed steadily over the horizon, casting a warm glow through the window of Dan's office. But it offered little comfort amid the storm of anxiety brewing inside him. Today wasn't just another work day. It was the day he would lead the first meeting with his newly formed group. The air was thick with anticipation and self-doubt. Every twitch of his fingers on the desk echoed the thoughts racing through his mind. What if I fell short of their expectations? The worry coursed through him like a dark undercurrent. He questioned the depth of his commitment. Could he genuinely motivate this group? Would they see him as a credible leader or just another figure parroting cliches? His self-critique spiraled, taunting him with each passing minute until it felt almost unbearable. As the clock neared the meeting time, he shifted his focus from his racing thoughts to the notes he had meticulously organized. Each point on the agenda felt like an anchor, holding him to a reality he desperately wanted to shape. He inhaled deeply, summoning the courage to redirect his scattered energy. When Jenna and the others arrived, Dan forced a smile, masking the nerves that coiled within him. He noted their enthusiasm and felt an unfamiliar flicker of hope. Jenna initiated introductions, and Dan's eyes met his colleagues with purpose. Engaging them required more than presenting his ideas. He needed to create a space where voices beyond his could resonate. With each discussion point, he shared his vision while actively inviting opinions. The early exchanges were tentative, a delicate dance of ideas that echoed his initial fears. Would their reflections mirror his aspirations? But as they warmed to the dialogue, varying perspectives ignited a different urgency within him. He noticed how passionately they debated strategies, each voice a unique thread weaving into the collective vision. His confidence grew as he gently pushed the pace of the conversation, urging them to sift through potential roadblocks and leap toward creative solutions. He felt a rhythm emerging, And with each idea that sparked, he realized he wasn't alone in this endeavor. The group began to coalesce, pooling their diverse insights into actionable plans. They tossed around strategies like a game, and for the first time, Dan felt buoyed by shared resolve. But as the conversations deepened, so did his internal conflict. During a discussion about student engagement tactics, one member raised concerns about practicality, paraphrasing worries Dan had silently harbored. "We don't want to overwhelm the students or come off as intrusive. They might shut down if we push too hard too soon." The wave of discomfort threatened to wash over him. His instinct was to defend his enthusiasm for the initiative, but he caught himself. Here was an opportunity, not just to bend his ideas to fit others, but to create an authentic dialogue. "I appreciate that perspective," he replied carefully, peeling back layers of his defensiveness. "Let's explore ways we can approach this gradually. What balance can we strike to keep the students engaged without overwhelming them?" As they navigated through potential modifications, Dan felt a crack in his previous doubts begin to heal. He realized speaking his anxieties was as essential as articulating his vision. Each challenge presented itself not as a barrier, but as a welcomed conversation and route to development. When the meeting concluded, laughter and excitement echoed in the room, and Dan caught a glimpse of progress he hadn't dared to envision. The group left with a roadmap ahead, and as he sat back in his chair, two revelations settled over him. He wasn't simply fostering change within the students, he was redefining his own understanding of leadership. Yet, even amid this unfolding success, gnawing questions lingered. The deeper he ventured into this collaborative dynamic, the more he grappled with his evolving identity. Was he becoming the leader he imagined, or merely echoing the voices of his team? As the weight of his thoughts settled in for the night, he recognized he was on the precipice of something profound: personal growth intertwined with professional aspirations. This journey would demand far more from him than he initially realized. The stakes felt alarmingly high. As he shed old insecurities, what would emerge in their place? He drifted to sleep with a single pressing thought tuning into his consciousness: the importance of authenticity, not just for his team, but for himself. Tomorrow he would wrestle with how to inspire genuine connection without losing his own voice in the process. The path ahead shimmered with uncertainty, a reminder of the vulnerability required for true growth. And he braced himself, resolute yet anxious, for what transformation awaited him next. The dawn broke with a new resolve, the shadows of doubt slowly fading as Dan stirred awake. It was not just another day. It was an opportunity to fortify the leadership shift he had begun to embrace. He stepped into the morning sunlight, feeling its warmth cascade over him, reminding him that change, though daunting, could also be invigorating. In the following hours, Dan sat at his desk, notebooks sprawled out in front of him, brainstorming ways to infuse genuine dialogue into each meeting. His fingers danced over the pages with a fervor he hadn't experienced before, jotting down thoughts on trust-building exercises and shared leadership strategies that would enable the team to display their strengths even more robustly. The rhythm of his thoughts flowed freely, an exciting symphony of ideas. Yet as he developed these plans, the nagging question arose again. How could he ensure he was contributing authentically instead of merely playing the role of a facilitator? Each idea he penned sent a rippling sense of exhilaration and apprehension through him. He needed to confront the duality of his aspirations, to lead not only with authority, but with authenticity. Later that day, Dan found himself face-to-face with Jenna over coffee, her warmth and approachability a stark contrast to his frenetic energy. "I'm trying to figure out how to maintain open communication in our meetings, I fear I might slip back into old habits." The confession felt raw but necessary. She sipped her coffee, nodding thoughtfully. Dan, you have to trust them and show your vulnerabilities. Leadership isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. You have to share your concerns. That's what builds connection. Her words churned in his mind, painting new pathways for understanding his identity as a leader. The hesitancy that had once weighed heavily upon him started to feel more manageable, transforming into a challenge to embrace rather than a fear to suppress. Fueled by this conversation, Dan returned to his office, aware that he was about to step deeper into uncharted waters, being vulnerable with the team. He was determined not only to guide, but to be a participant in their journey. What would it feel like to let them in on his journey, including the doubts that had recently plagued him? He decided that it was time to experiment. The week glided forward, filled with meetings and brainstorming sessions. Each interaction ignited his motivation further. He actively encouraged team members to share their thoughts, pushing the boundaries of their comfort zones. Discussions flowed a way that felt refreshing, the group dynamic evolving into something he had yearned for. Yet it wasn't without its struggles. One afternoon, while reviewing ideas on outreach strategies, a member pointedly dismissed an approach Dan had favored. "That won't resonate with students. We need to rethink this completely." The sting of their critique was immediate. Rather than retreat into defensiveness, Dan paused, allowing the initial embarrassment to pass. "Let's explore that," he responded, bracing himself for an intense dialogue. What had once felt like a personal attack now emerged as an opportunity for growth. The team began to dissect his suggestion, uncovering deeper insights about their audience. With each layered conversation, Dan felt the lines of his leadership begin to blur with authenticity. Instead of feeling diminished, he found his voice speaking with clarity, knowing that these collective insights were shaping something far stronger than he could have envisioned alone. As the meeting drew to a close, Dan noticed an unexpected satisfaction blooming within him, a realization that he could embrace both authority and transparency. He left feeling energized, convinced that his journey was transforming him more than he had anticipated. However, lingering within was a new unease. Was he stepping too far away from his initial vision? In seeking authenticity, was he compromising the potential direction he had envisioned? The tightening knot in his stomach begged for resolution. That night, as he lay awake, the uncertain path ahead loomed larger than life. Tomorrow would be critical. He'd have to navigate the tension between leading with confidence while allowing space for authenticity. What revelations awaited in that delicate balance? The urge to grasp control and the need to embrace vulnerability danced in his mind, creating an intricate choreography of leadership. He exhaled deeply, eyes falling shut yet again, ready to confront whatever awaited him at dawn. Little did he know, the next challenge would force him to question his deepest beliefs about authority and acceptance. Dan stood once again at the edge of certainty, but this time his heart beat with a newfound confidence. Over the past weeks, he had embraced vulnerability and authenticity, grounding himself in the belief that true leadership flourished through a shared sense of purpose. The previous doubts that had plagued him felt like ghosts, muted echoes that had no power in the present. With the coalition of his colleagues established, they had explored a robust curriculum that empowered students to cultivate their innate potential through hands-on science initiatives. Meetings transformed from mere brainstorming sessions into a dialogue that blossomed with diverse ideas. They had drafted a comprehensive outreach strategy, one that engaged not just students but their families as well. A sense of cohesive teamwork emerged, shaping a vision far greater than Dan could have imagined on his own. When the time came for the first official project launch, Dan stood before an assembly of students, teacher colleagues, and interested parents in the invigorating pulse of the school auditorium. The auditorium roared with energy as laughter, "Today marks a new beginning," he proclaimed, his voice steady and powerful. It's not just a chance to delve into science, it's the opening of doors that lead to innovation, curiosity, and the understanding that where you start doesn't dictate where you can go. Let's explore these possibilities together. Who knows what we might uncover? As he spoke, he saw the faces of his students transform from skepticism to interest. Their dreams seemed tangible, awakening a spark within those who had previously felt overlooked. That was the moment. The stakes were high. He could feel it in every pore. This was the culmination of individual growth, built upon the foundation of risk, uncertainty, and genuine connection. The fear that had once silenced him faded, overtaken by a sense of purpose. The challenge to lead this group had not only transformed his professional aspirations, but had clarified the weight of his personal integrity. With the launch behind him, Dan experienced an overwhelming wave of emotions. He recognized that real leadership was not simply about claiming authority, but about empowering those around him. Days later, the opportunity for recognition came when a local educators summit invited him to share his success story. Standing on stage, flanked by peers, he delivered a speech that resonated both personally and professionally. He recounted both the hesitation of authenticity and the thrill of collaboration, how redefining his leadership ignited not just a project, but a community. The response was palpable. The applause poured in waves, validating both his journey and the capacity of education to uplift others. Afterward, several educators approached him to express admiration for his approach, eager to implement similar strategies in their own institutions. In that moment, Dan felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. He had not only transformed his own insecurities, but had inspired others to recognize the potential for change in their own contexts. Much like the first time he faced that billionaire's laughter, Dan stood proud, but this time it was different. He felt like he belonged. No longer was he a mere observer. He had become a catalyst for transformation, proving that those perceived as underprivileged could indeed lead visionary initiatives. The applause echoed in his ears, a reminder of the journey he had embarked on, a journey shaped by confrontation, growth, and accountability. A new chapter of his life awaited, marked by solid confidence and empowered purpose. It was then that Dan realized he had achieved far more than a grant or a successful project. He had conquered self-doubt, established his influence within the educational community, and grown into a leader unafraid of embracing authenticity. With every step taken, he reflected on the truth of his transformation and felt a profound sense of achievement and fulfillment. Yes, the laughter had lost its sting. Instead, it had become a stepping stone to greatness. Now it's your turn. You need to subscribe now to catch more compelling transformations and emotional journeys. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Every click matters. Comment below to share your insights or theories about Dan's remarkable journey. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness the power of personal growth. Let's spread inspiration far and wide.